All right, so we're going to look at literal equations, and literal equations are equations that states a relationship among different quantities. They have one or more variables, and usually they're going to have like 2 or 3. And to write literal equations, we have some steps that we want to follow. So first, we want to identify each quantity that will need to be represented by a variable. Then we want to assign letters to those variables. So if we have apples, we could use A. If we have bananas, we could use B. We could still use X and Y, but we want to make sure that we're writing those on the side so we don't get confused and forget what variable means what. And then the last step is we want to write an equation that describes the relationship between the variables. Okay, so these are the steps we're going to follow, and we're going to do an example together. So this first example here says your science teacher is explaining how to convert from Fahrenheit to Celsius for an experiment. She says to do this, you first take your degrees in Fahrenheit and subtract 32. Then multiply that quantity by 5/9, right? A formula to represent this relationship. So one thing that I noticed was she actually used the word subtract. So we know at some point we're going to be subtracting 32. That's pretty important to notice. Another thing is we want to start with our degrees in Fahrenheit. Okay, so it says first take that. So we're going to start with our degrees in Fahrenheit. So I'm going to say over here that F is our degrees in Fahrenheit. And then I'm also going to identify that C is our degrees in Celsius, because eventually, we want our degrees to be in Celsius. Okay, so we're going to start with our degrees in Fahrenheit. So I'm going to start with the variable F. After that, it says subtract 32. So we're going to subtract 32 from F. Okay, the next thing it says is we want to then multiply that quantity by 5/9. Now the key word here is that quantity, okay? If we put this like 5/9 on the end here, I'm only multiplying that by that minus 32. I'm not multiplying it by the whole quantity of that F minus 32. So to make sure that I make it a quantity, I have to have parentheses around that. Okay, so I'm grouping that together into one quantity, and then I'm multiplying that by 5/9. So we could put a dot in here if we want to, or we could just make sure that they're squished together. And we can write it at the end, but mathematically, we actually like to write it at the beginning. That's usually where we write our numbers. So we're going to go ahead and write the 5/9 right at the beginning here. We usually have our numbers in front of our variables when we're multiplying. And that is going to equal our degrees in Celsius. Okay, and if we look at this to double check, when we think of our order of operations, we always start with parentheses. So that means we're first going to be subtracting that 32 from our degrees in Fahrenheit, and then we're going to be multiplying. Okay, so our PEMDAS, our order of operations, means that this equation works. Okay, so you try right below it. Go ahead and read through that one, try that one, and pause the video while you're doing it, and then I will go through it as well. All right, so I'm just gonna label some things on the side. So it says he predicts that if you take the number of AP class taken and multiply by 5 and then divide by the number of years you'll be in college, you can predict your predicted average college GPA. Okay. So I'm going to use C. Whoops. For number of AP classes. Okay, so we want to take the number of AP classes. Okay, that's C. So we're going to start there, and we're going to multiply that by 5. Okay, so right here it says multiply by 5. So we're going to write the 5 out in front of that C because we like to put our number in front of our variable. And then it says divide by the number of years you will be in college. So I'm going to use Y for the number of years in college. Okay, so I'm going to do a little fraction bar underneath both of those and put Y down there. It's number of years. And that's going to give us our predicted average college GPA. So that's another thing that we need a variable for. Okay, so average college GPA. I'm just going to use X for that. So this is our average college. I'm just going to say GPA right here. And that's going to equal X. Okay, you might have different variables than me. You might have wrote it with this out in front and then like this. We do like to have our division as a fraction, not the symbol that looks like this. Okay, we like division as a fraction, so we're not going to use it. And then that is our answer.